Hi, I'm Peter, and I'm very excited because my new book is due to be published on the 9th of December. Here's the cover. It tells you more about the book and more about me. Essentially, it's about the mind-body problem, an extremely difficult philosophical problem, and my attempt to solve it. The book's in three parts. The first part is about the mind-body problem and the reasons for some of the difficulties. And my attempted solution will be very closely aligned with contemporary physics. And that's why part two is all about fundamental physics. And part three gives my proposed solution. Nearly all attempts to solve the mind-body problem have been on the basis of physicalism. This is the position that our world is fundamentally physical, and mind must be explained in physical terms. No physicalist attempt to solve the mind-body problem has ever been remotely successful. And this has been despite over a century of intense efforts. Some philosophers have even gone so far as to deny that mind exists. And this is obviously ludicrous. You can't deny basic data about the world. Others say that mind exists, but only as an illusion. But this is incoherent. You're saying that mind exists, but an illusion is something that doesn't exist. Far more promising is the idea that mind exists, but it's identical to something physical, perhaps something functional, something going on in the brain. This is the best idea yet, but it does have some problems of its own. There's the explanatory gap. How can a certain pattern of neural firings, for example, be identical to a pain? Next, mind plays no essential causal role. It seems that the law of physics do all the causal work. But our minds do seem to be useful to us in our day-to-day existence. Finally, there's the boundary problem. How can we give a principled account in physical terms of the boundary between conscious and non-conscious portions of the universe? These difficulties lead us to a final attempted solution. Psychism is the position that mind exists everywhere and is identical to something physical. The boundary problem is eliminated. The explanatory gap we could take just as a brute fact, perhaps, but causal or overdetermination remains. We've just reduced the problem from the level of biology to the level of microphysics. Very few people have made idealist attempts to solve the mind-body problem. Idealism is the thesis that nature is grounded in mind, mind-like entities and their properties, which are experiences, percepts, acts of will, and such like things. This turns the mind-body problem on its head. The problem is now to account for the physical contents of the universe and the physical laws in solely mentalistic terms. There are several varieties of idealism, and most fail for one of two reasons. Either they deny the reality of natural entities, dinosaurs, mountains, atoms, etc., or they fail to engage adequately with contemporary science. As we'll see, my solution, Pan-idealism, avoids both these faults. Part 2 on fundamental physics is a really substantial part of the book, but I'm only going to discuss it very briefly here. There's a chapter on classical physics, concentrating on special relativity, but Newtonian mechanics and also general relativity are touched upon. I give a thorough introduction to quantum physics, maths included. And I also discuss the controversy between the Copenhagen school, led by Niels Bohr, and the rebels, Einstein, Schrödinger, and Bell, who wanted the ambition of science still to be to actually understand the universe. Their rebellion eventually led to the discovery of a new feature of the universe, that of entanglement. And this was discovered despite years earlier, the Copenhagen school declaring that the theory was complete. In my discussion, I go back to the original papers of Einstein, Bohr, Schrödinger, and others. Now we come to Pan-idealism, which is my proposed solution to the mind-body problem. Pan-idealism is a metaphysical system that combines panpsychism with idealism. And it does this in order to reinforce the strengths and eliminate the weaknesses of both. It inherits the advantage of realism from panpsychism. Indeed, this realism is expressed with more clarity than in physicalism, as we'll see. Idealism makes the mind-body problem much easier. This is because our sole access to the physical world is through our percepts and our theories, both of which are mentalistic in their character. Let C be the catalogue of all the true individuals that exist in the universe at a particular time t. For example, this particular molecule and that particular cat are in C. Each entity in the catalogue is, in its intrinsic nature, a centre of experience, and most of these centres are extremely primitive, but they can perceive others. They can also act with usually primitive freedom according to this percept. Definition: we'll call all such true individuals experience. Here's a Victorian street scene. How would followers of a particular metaphysical systems understand it? According to most physicalists, there are 4 centres of experience in this photo. That's the 3 people and the horse. But according to panpsychists, there are many more experience. For example, every molecule in the drain pipe is a centre of experience. Likewise, every molecule in the cobbles is a centre of experience. Experience are everywhere, even in the molecules of the air. If we attempted to draw them all, it would obliterate the picture. According to Pan-idealism, centres of experience are likewise everywhere. But according to Pan-idealism, the physical world doesn't exist. At least it doesn't exist at the foundational level of existence. It's something higher up. The task of Pan-idealism is to synthesize the physical world from the percepts and volitions of these primitive centers of experience. This is done through what I call intersubjective consilience. I'll give the example of length, where we're attempting to measure the length of a bone. A scientist sees this situation and realizes that the bone and the ruler take up equal portions of her visual percept. She concludes that the bone is 5 centimeters long. But scientific results aren't valid until they've been confirmed by others. Another scientist agrees. And they decide to publish. Now, if we were to try to define length in terms of human intersubjective consilience alone, this would be hopelessly anthropocentric. So now let's consider a dog. Dogs are closely related to humans, and we can be very confident that their visual percepts are extremely similar to our own. So even though they have limited cognitive powers, their percept confirms our own according to the principle of intersubjective consilience. And in fact, even if the humans were to leave the laboratory, the dog's percept provides some evidence for the length of the bone. We arrive at an important definition. Physical length is the maximal intersubjective consilience of perceived length, and it is derived by combining the percepts of all experience. This definition is no longer anthropocentric, and recall that experience are plentiful everywhere throughout the room, and indeed in the ruler and bone itself. We can now sketch physics in Pan-idealism. We use intersubjective consilience to define length, as we've just shown. We can define time somewhat similarly. And in this way, I hope you can see that we've essentially defined space-time. In essence, we've defined physics, because physics is essentially goings-on in space-time. I'm going to deal very briefly with free will and Pan-idealism. In any metaphysical system, the only true causation is at the foundational level, and therefore, in physicalism, randomness being at the foundational level trumps free will. There can be no libertarian or genuine free will in any form of physicalism. In Pan-idealism, free will, or at least will, being mentalistic, is at the base layer, and therefore it trumps randomness. And so there is the possibility of having libertarian or genuine free will in Pan-idealism. There are many arguments denying the possibility that humans can have free will, but these always assume physicalism. And I show this in my book by taking the example of Schrödinger, who gives a very good discussion. But for the subtleties of free will and how it relates to our cognitive powers, I follow Robert Kane, who gives a very good account. Next, we come to the question of which interpretations of quantum mechanics are consistent with Pan-idealism. We don't want an interpretation in which consciousness is mentioned in the physics, and this is because consciousness is at the foundational level, and we want to explain the physics in terms of consciousness, and so consciousness shouldn't appear in the physics. We have to say goodbye to Copenhagen, at least as it's usually understood, and also Wigner. We've just seen that Pan-idealism is consistent with us having genuine free will. And given that this is possible, free will is an excellent thing to possess. We therefore bid goodbye to deterministic interpretations of quantum mechanics, such as Bohmian mechanics and the many worlds interpretation. We can definitely say yes to those interpretations in which the collapse of the wave function is described in objective physical terms. This includes Girardi, Rimini, and Weber, also Pearl's continuous spontaneous localization, and the Penrose and Hameroff objective reduction theory, when we consider it in terms of its physics alone. How are we to characterize true individuals in Pan-idealism in physical terms? We factorize psi, the wave function of the world, as much as possible. Here, each of the alphas is unentangled from all the rest. But each alpha is an entangled system that cannot be further disentangled. Given the founding tenets of Pan-idealism, it's reasonable to assume that intrinsically each alpha is an experient, a true individual. And this is also consistent with the holistic nature of consciousness. Whenever an objective collapse occurs, this changes psi, giving rise to a modified factorization. This, in essence, gives a solution to the combination problem. The combination problem asks that how do the primitive minds that are assumed to exist within atoms and molecules combine to form human minds? How does dynamics in Pan-idealism work? Here we have a sketch of the universe at cosmic time t. Psi naught is the initial quantum state of the universe before any collapse events have occurred. The black dots are collapse or localization events. And taken together, the past light cones of these events mark the past of the universe, which is drawn in brown. The boundary of this region is the cosmic present, which I've labelled now. Blue is the cosmic future, which is still open to various possibilities. And psi t is the modified wave function after all the correction. Psi t is the current wave function of the universe. It is derived from psi 0 after all the collapse events marked by the black dots. Individually, and ignoring all others, each agent attempts to land its particles in the future. Each agent must do this consistent with psi t and also with its own state of entanglement. In the sketch, there are 6 agents which are free particles. On the right, there are 3 agents which are entangled pairs. And over on the left, there's an entangled triplet and also an entangled quartet. But entanglements can be much bigger than this. Which particle landings succeed and which fail? This is done at the level of individual particles and ignoring agents. The rule is that any particle landing in the future light cone of any other attempted landing will fail, and these have been marked as red crosses on the diagram. All other attempted landings succeed, and these have been marked with the green dots. The reason for this rule is that the successful landings will have disturbed the wave function, and therefore the unsuccessful landings attempts are no longer valid. We join the green dots together by their past low light cones to form a new now. And I've relabeled the previous now as just now. We can see that this is analogous to the situation at cosmic time t. But because of the successful localizations, the wave function has changed somewhat. And this implies that the set of agents has also changed somewhat, and this explains the combination problem. This two-stage process is a natural way of explaining how conflicting agents with contradictory wills get their differences resolved. Finally, what are the advantages of Pan-idealism? The explanatory gap is solved because we know nothing about the physical except through our experiences. Realism about objects in the world is accepted by hypothesis. Moreover, although science can only describe these objects as mathematical abstractions, Pan-idealism says that they have an intrinsic nature and that they are primitive minds. Consistency with science. If a bone has a certain length as determined by Pan-idealism, then it must have the same length according to scientists, who can be assumed to be a representative subset of all experience. Indeed, the general accuracy of our perception is essential to our survival as a species. There's no problem of mental causation because there's no physical causation at all. So-called physical laws are nothing other than descriptions of the stereotypical behavior of very simple experience. In the philosophy of mind, a zombie is an entity that's physically and behaviorally identical to you and me. The only difference is that a zombie doesn't have a mind. So there's no possible way of detecting a zombie. In Pan-idealism, however, my brain is nothing other than a hierarchical system of experience. Take away my mind, therefore, and you have, in that very action, annihilated a chunk of my brain. So zombies are impossible in Pan-idealism. In fact, for a committed Pan-idealist such as myself, even the concept of a zombie atom is impossible in this or in any other universe. Finally, Pan-idealism solves the free will and combination problems. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you'll go and buy my book. It's a cracking good read. It's already available for pre-order on amazon.co.uk and probably other Amazons as well a bit later. Also, don't forget to check out my website. Thank you very much. Bye.